Today we will be talking about PRRS, PCV2 control, and now switching back to PRRS. And in the next half an hour we would like to share with you a couple of instruments, how we are able to control PRRS, but what we have also seen is that PRRS gets more and more severe over the years to come. We see those highly pathogenic strains rising, and therefore, I would like to start the presentation and just asking Daniel, what is his idea why we see those highly pathogenic strains rising, causing the trouble they are causing?
Yeah, I'm back. Now switch the language. Pleasure to share the stage with you, Marius. I work with a lot of people. I think you're the most creative mind I've seen out there. So. Good to be with you guys here again. Now talking about PRRS, talking about this so-called hyperpathogenic one. And if you ask Marcelo as a diagnostician, it is true, right? The viruses we are seeing today, they are meaner. They replicate with higher loads. They cause more severe lesions. And then we work with producers that said the other day, hey, if we can bring the win to finish mortality under 40%, we are lucky with these strains we're doing today. And again, it's not only PRRS, right? Grain of salt there, it's a bit of continuous flows, a bit of co-infections, and that's what we're gonna talk about here today. How do you manage those hyperpathogenic PRRS? Well, it's still PRRS. So Reed Phillips said, Bob Morrison said that 10 years ago, we have the tools and we continue to have the tools. The answers change over time, but the questions are the same, right? And that's what we're here to talk with you guys about, those five questions that are gonna help us walk through what's going on in the farm, Marius. And then the question is, why or when or why does PRRS become more virulent? And here we came up with this demonstration of if you have three rings, each ring representing a different virus. If you're not colorblind, there will be three different colors. And so this represents a situation that the more and more we do whole genome sequencing in the US, the more we see that this is common. Farms infected not only with one clonal single virus, but infected with a cloud of different viruses. And when they infect the same pig, what's going to happen? Those viruses are going to recombine. They're going to infect the same macrophages, and during replications, they're going to exchange, they're going to swap genetic material, and then you have resulting viruses that will be a combination of those three. If the number here represents the replication capacity of those relative to parent strains, the reality is most of the new recombined, so the new offspring, they're just going to be less efficient and they're going to die out over time. But then natural selection is going to select the viruses with higher replication potential. And the bad news is replication potential is again associated with virulence, with infection, with clinical signs. So with time, those new viruses, they're gonna outcompete the parental strains, and you're gonna see more clinical signs, and those pathogens are gonna, those new pathogens are gonna thrive. Most of those come from the grow-finished pigs, as we talked before.
And when we are taking a look at the mortality rate, we put up a chart here demonstrating that those strains that are currently circulating in our systems that are causing us a lot of headache because they are associated with a big negative impact. And I have put this chart up here to prove your former colleague, Professor Gregory Stevenson, wrong, because I still remember the first podcast that we interviewed him. He's an excellent researcher and a very bright mind. He said, yeah, Marius, don't worry about PRRS 1 that you have in Europe. It's just baby PRRS. So we here in the US, we are dealing with a nasty PRRS 2. But he was, back then he was right, actually. But what we have seen also with PRRS 1, so those strains here, the Rosalia strain in Spain, and the Austrian strain that are also associated to really high impact in terms of mortality comparing to those strains that are circulating in the Americas and in China. And what you can also see, Daniel, is that when we are taking a look on the economic numbers, that it's quite a significant increase in terms of financial input, right?
Yeah, so both of those studies are from Dr. Holdkamp's team in 2013 and 2020. You see, though, this is the economic impact, annual economic impact, just due to productivity changes, right? And it has increased, and we think, and this is using data until 2020, and so that's before the emergence of those so-called lineage 1C 0.5 virulent ones. So we think it's going to be north of 1.2 billion for sure. What's that, Reed? Hard to tell, but it's going to be north of that, right? And then you have a breakdown of what does that mean for per sow or per pig. It's those numbers add up pretty quickly. And again, that 1.2 billion or so, we're talking about impacting productivity, right? So it's lower growth, higher mortality, feed conversion, all of that. And on top of that, you have those things that it's also very significant. It's not included in that 1.2 billion, but we can't ignore those. Care, right? We're talking about sow herds, 5,000 sow herds with a few hundred of sows dead per week in the first, during those first few weeks. How fun is it to drag that sows, right? And what else do you do if you have to drag a few sows, some dozen sows per day or more? What else are you gonna do for pig care, for sow care? And so the impact is tremendous. And then of course antibiotic use is goes to the roof when you have PRRS infection because of your strepto, your APP, your mycoplasma, whatever else going on. You're just gonna need more treatments. But we have some good news, right, Marius?
Exactly. So luckily, PRRS is not only that PRRS is getting more severe, we also have the tools to control it. So when we are talking about vaccination, which we did already quite a bit today, we see that when we are vaccinating pigs, we are able to reduce, here we are talking about the lung lesions, mortality, average daily weight gain. Those are the parameters that we're usually tracking, right? So now we are talking about lung lesions, that we are able to see a significant reduction in terms of lung lesions as one parameter, not only against those regular pathogenic PRRS strains that are circulating, but also against those highly pathogenic PRRS strains that are causing us headache. The other thing that I would like to share with you is a study that demonstrates the impact of vaccination in the pigs. And this was a study from Greg Haywick. He was investigating the impact of PRRS in vaccinated and unvaccinated pigs. And what you can see here, this is the baseline. The baseline is 760 grams per day, the scattered white circle. And when we have challenged our pigs and those pigs were vaccinated, we see only a very slight decrease, so 20 grams average daily weight gain difference. So vaccination was nearly totally capable of mitigating the negative effect of PRRS. When those animals have not been vaccinated and challenged, you can see a big difference in terms of average daily weight gain. So even small doses of virus were able to impact the pig significantly. This is one part of the truth. The other part of the truth is why we are talking about 5 steps. Why are we adding biosecurity and management practices to our PRRS control approach? This is the same graph now as a box plot, a kind of a box plot chart, where you see again the 740 grams, right, in vaccinated pigs, 560 grams in unvaccinated pigs, and here we have increasing amount of virus load for the challenge. So this is a low to moderate amount of challenge. And here, when we increase the challenge dose, we see that vaccination is still efficacious when we compare it to unvaccinated, but we see that it struggles more to keep the full genetic potential for those pigs. So therefore, it's super important when we're talking about PRRS control that we talk about vaccination and we talk about biosecurity and management to create a scenario where you reduce the virus load and we get the most benefit from our vaccination program. And this is actually why we're talking about the 5 steps. The 5 steps, they work for PRRS, they work as well for PCV2. And I like it because we have learned so much about PRRS over the last 20, 30 years. And now it's time to put it together into a simple, structured way to apply the knowledge to control the disease in our farm. And during the next 18 remaining minutes, Daniel and me will have the pleasure to walk you through those different steps, those 5 different steps. So, Daniel, what would be the first step when I am thinking about PRRS control in my farm?
So the first step is define your goal, and it's got to be laser focused, and it's got to be very measurable. Is it going to be control or elimination? And whatever you decide, make sure that the definitions are pretty are clear, right, for the rest of the team. Because control for you may mean something, control for the farm may be something else, control for the supervisor may be something else. So we're going to get more deep into what we mean by control, but the first questions there is control or elimination, right? Elimination may be a good idea for you if you are like a genetic company, kind of business model is they're going to sell negative pigs, so they gotta make sense for them to go negative, live on a high biosecurity world, and avoid infection as much as possible. Keep those pigs negative. If you're not in that world, if you're more a commercial system where throughput, productivity means more for you, then, and especially if you're in a region where you are likely to find wild type virus or viruses circulating, then reaching control, more specifically reaching the stable world here may be a good goal to accomplish. And there is this transition, this period of transition, right, between high prevalence and actually stable, which is a very dangerous place to be, because at that point the sow farm is likely going to be subclinical. So you look at the numbers, you look at the pigs, everything looks fine, but it's subclinical. You are still shedding wild type virus. You only know if you measure. We're going to talk more about that in step 5, and that transition is super important to determine what you're going to do with the growing pigs going forward. Those numbers come from the U.S., where we tracked win to finish mortality from flows coming from either unstable, stable, or negative sow herds. This is all in Iowa. If you want the full details, the data has been published. We can disclose. The long story short here is that for that system, they saw no difference in win to finish mortality from flows coming from stable, right? It reached full control compared to negative, but of course, as expected, higher mortality from flows coming from unstable sow farms. So understanding the goal is the key for step 1. Again, understanding, defining, and communicating that well with your team to make sure everybody's in the same page. And again, the negative for the stable scenario, the control scenario, the goal is we're gonna get that herd immunity high for the breeding herd and for the downstream, and we're gonna keep that herd immunity up with ongoing vaccinations, which depending on your situation, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year. Not sure if there's anybody that does more than that. Most cases 2 or 3 should be enough. And if you go to the elimination, gotta remember that you reach the elimination, now you gotta keep that herd negative, because there will be no immunity, and if you break again, then the productivity losses are 40 to 50% higher than if you break a stable sow herd. So if you want to go negative, make sure that this is the best thing for you, because economically it only makes sense if you keep that negative herd negative for 2 or 3 years, because there will be no herd immunity there, Marius. And that's the step one, is define your goal, understand your goal, make sure it's measurable, and make sure it's clear, crystal clear, not clear as mud to the rest of the team.
Right, yes, exactly.
And then what's step two?
And then as a second step, we need to talk about diagnostics. And I really liked the chart that Reed pulled up early this morning, where he demonstrated the growth of knowledge, particularly when it comes about to diagnostic. And this goes back to the guys that we have today here within the room, Marcello, Daniel. They have created really all the knowledge that we need to implement in order to determine the current PRRS status. And this is just a chart demonstrating that production systems, and this is not very new to you. I think you are here on the same boat, on the same side as we. You see that there is a reduction in individual samples, and we have a steep increase in aggregated samples. So production systems are making advantage of the knowledge that is already available today, meaning aggregated samples. When we are comparing, when we have a prevalence of 3%, for example, so 3 out of 100 pigs are positive in the room. When we are talking about individual serum samples, we would need to take 64 samples in order to detect at least 1 positive ones. But when we are talking about processing fluids, when we're implementing processing fluid sampling in our system, then for sure only 1 sample can be enough to detect even PRRS when it's circulating on low prevalence. So make an advantage of aggregated samples, and the other very important part is consecutive sampling. So sample batch after batch after batch. We know that PRRS is shed intermittently, so therefore it's important to implement weekly sampling in order to really determine if you're on the right track and to determine if you have reached PRRS stability. If you want to learn more about the benefits of genotyping and how genotyping can be used and how it cannot be used, you can encourage you to vote for the jukebox topic from Daniel, where he will guide you through the most important parts of do's and don'ts of genotyping. Genotyping will help us to understand the number of strains present in our system, because we have learned that the majority of the farms, they're breaking not only with 1, but with multiple PRRS strains. We can use it to identify the origin of the strain, and we can use it to identify whether this is a new introduction or this is a strain that has been circulating in our system already for quite some time. So genotyping is really a very powerful tool when we're talking about setting the status. And now, Daniel, we have identified our goal. We know where we are currently standing. Let's talk about the constraints.
You know where you are, you know where your destination point is, and now it's time to identify those rocks on the way so you could navigate through those. And so, and you heard from Marcelo, and it's the same concept for PRRS, right? You heard from the PCV2. It's not, PCV2 is never going to be alone, PRRS is never going to be alone, so you got to understand a little bit about the infection dynamics, so you understand what are the most applicable solutions for your farm, and then the co-infections. So the infection chain for PRRS is simple. There's horizontal transmission, so transmission from pig to pig as they grow, right? Especially from older piglets to the younger one. So gotta make as best as you can your flow be unidirectional, better yet if it's unidirectional all in, all out, so you can break that horizontal transmission going on. And PH talked a lot about the vertical transmission, right, from gestation to lactation. So when pigs are born positive for PRRS, then the expectation is not good, because that duration of viremia, you heard from him, it could be several months. And so we can do whatever we can to stop the virus up there in the reproductive cycle, make all you can to produce negative pigs at weaning, at birth, as measured by tongue fluids or processing fluids, and then keep that unidirectional flow all in, all out if you can, to break that horizontal transmission. And here there will be some other examples. We could talk the whole day about that, right? But just as an example of what we mean by constraints, there are constraints of biosecurity. If you have a leaky herd with ongoing introduction of different strains and different pathogens, it's going to be hard to control. Labor, right? One thing is on the paper, what your SOP says. The other thing, what's being executed, right, at the farm level. So labor, pig flow, we talked about that in the previous slide. Co-infections, think about PRRS, yes, but if you have those extreme mortalities over 20%, it's rarely going to be PRRS alone. So you got to understand what else you're dealing with a necropsy project and diagnostics to really map what's going on. And then you implement the vaccination strategically based on what you learn here from these other factors.
And when we are talking about biosecurity, as Daniel said, there is a lot of knowledge to share, a lot of knowledge to implement, but we do have a tool in place that is called Combat. It checks the biosecurity. PH mentioned it this morning. This is an evaluation of the tool. This will help you within 15 minutes to check the most important aspect of your biosecurity constraints and suggest actions to be implemented in order to improve your biosecurity. And this is a short summary of a publication from Europe where they have investigated what are constraints and what are drivers in order to implement biosecurity. And when we are talking about biosecurity, I think it's pretty important to look at the biosecurity, at the farm-specific biosecurity, and discuss those constraints as well as the drivers for the biosecurity, because actually we have everything in place. We know the economic benefit of fewer breaks. We know how much PRRS is costing us. We have tools that deliver clear guidance, and as PH mentioned earlier this morning, collaboration is pivotal. So collaboration with the people who are responsible for the processes in the farm, as well as collaboration with neighboring farms. So when we implement and when we keep the barriers and the drivers in mind, I think we have everything in place in order to control biosecurity. Luckily, we also know how to control other pathogens such as PCV2. And Marcello said that there is those are buddies, right? PRRS and PCV2. And it's very important to control them equally. What we see is we see a negative impact of PRRS, we see a negative impact of PCV2. When both of them occur simultaneously, this is, I always refer to Clayton saying 1 + 1 = 3, which I like a lot, because you see that there is a bigger negative impact when both of those pathogens are present at the same time on the farm. And what we have to keep in mind, when we are weaning PRRS positive pigs, and they are first PRRS positive and then they are infected with PCV2, the symptoms become even exacerbated. So therefore it's super important that when we think about health control on the farm, that we are implementing PRRS stability in our system. Regarding vaccination, there are also a couple of other things to take into consideration. We need to check the temperature just to make sure that we deliver the vaccine on full efficacy. Timing of vaccination is important. Make sure that we are 3 to 4 weeks prior to exposure. Pigs must be unstressed and healthy for vaccination. Dosing is very important to administer the full dose and only mix the vaccines that are intended to be mixed. When we're talking about applying half dose, for example, we see that there is a big increase in mortality. So we have roughly 50%, 50 to 60% more mortality in the groups that are not fully vaccinated. And we also see inactivation of vaccine if we are not mixing vaccines that are intended to be mixed. And so, for example, with our Diatec purified vaccines, this shouldn't be an issue, but just make sure that you are mixing products that are intended to be mixed. And now, Daniel, we know the goal, we know the status, we have used combat to identify the constraints in the systems, and now let's set up the plan.
And this plan is gonna be super simple if you did your homework right? Did they step one, understand where you wanna go, understand where you are with step two, and then understand all the rocks in between? Then if you have all that mapped for your herd, the step 4 should be straightforward. And because it's going back to those constraints and taking care of those, your combat tool will have helped you map what are the big gaps, and then the combat tools also kind of forecast, hey, if you don't, for example, have shower in, shower out, or if you don't do whatever it is that you're not implementing in the farm, it's gonna help you forecast how you improve your score, or how do you reduce your risk of infection should you implement X, Y, and Z, and then with that tool helps you prioritize what you do next. And same thing for the other five constraints that we talked about. Now that you understood those constraints, it's time to implement the appropriate solutions for that farm.
Right, and we know that biosecurity is very efficacious. So even simple aspects that are simple constraints that are identified in the farm, when they are taken care of, we can really improve biosecurity significantly and therefore improve our PRRS control. And Daniel, you do have the pleasure of another teaser presentation, right? So if you want to learn more about how we are able to lower disease pressure in our grow-finish herds, vote in the next jukebox session for Daniel's presentation.
And those will be other examples of getting into the breeding herd, to example of things you should do to, I think that goes back to what PH was talking about, the 10 magic rules, right? Or everybody has their rules. Is the long story short here, you could see some examples, but make everything you can to make it hard for the virus to jump from one pig to the next, from one crate to the next, from one room to the next, and that way from week to week and into perpetuity, right? And so basic things, we don't need to get into the details here. It's gonna be your Mac Rebel-like or your golden rules to make it tough for the virus to transmit. So you're gonna break that cycle, the vertical transmission cycle and the horizontal transmission cycle. You're also gonna take care of your co-infections as we talked about before. Your strep, your myco, your APP, whatever it's circulating, your parvo.
Exactly, and how to do that is applying a proper vaccination protocol. This is just a general recommendation. This will be adapted to your local needs, but what we have heard already this morning, that vaccination of the gill sort is super important. Introducing fully vaccinated, non-shedding gills. During gill introduction, we recommend double vaccination for PRRS, 4 weeks apart. In the gestation, as Daniel has mentioned, a mass vaccination 3 to 4 times a year would be state of art. You can also mix it with Circoflex and Mycoflex, and then make sure that we are vaccinating our piglets. So at weaning, apply a full dose of Engelvac PRRS MLV that can be also mixed with Myco and Circo, and then in the nursery take advantage of the easy administration of enterozoal ileitis. And why vaccination of pigs is so important in order to control PRRS on a whole herd level, let's take a look.
When an unvaccinated pig herd experiences a PRRS outbreak, the virus spreads rapidly. With an R value of 5.4, each infected pig will pass the virus to more than 5 new pigs, leading to rapid spread across the entire system. However, in fully vaccinated herds, the transmission rate is 10 times lower, and each infected pig passes the virus to an average of 0.3 new pigs. This low transmission rate will stop the spread of the virus. The PRRS infection will fizzle out if managed correctly. In commercial production systems, only 5 to 10% of the herd is breeding stock. The majority are growing pigs. When only sows are vaccinated, the infection will first spread extensively in piglets. Because of the high numbers of infected, shedding growing pigs, infection pressure increases and the PRRS virus can jump to the breeding herd, potentially causing clinical signs in vaccinated sows. By contrast, vaccinating both sows and piglets will limit the spread of the virus after introduction, and, if well managed, PRRS can disappear from the system. Vaccination effectively limits the spread of PRRS. Protect your sow herd by applying a whole herd vaccination program and including piglets in your vaccination plan.
So based on the constraints, we have implemented our solutions. And now let's take a closer look at the last and probably most important step, monitoring the outcome. It is important when we are taking a step back and we have implemented our monitoring program, our diagnostic monitoring program with processing fluids, that we keep on sampling those processing fluids up until we have reached stability. And what you will see here is when we put those results from the batch in the graph, that sometimes we see lower CT values, sometimes we see higher CT values. That is not very much of a concern as long as we really have a trend that is pointing towards stability. And stability meaning we have 12 consecutive weeks where we were able to wean PRRS negative pigs. And this is actually the scenario where we want to go to. This is where we have reached our PRRS stability. This is where we have maximized our genetic potential. And Daniel, based on your data from the POM project, you can also give us a little bit of a guidance regarding timelines when to expect what after the outbreak, right?
Yeah, and like you said, we want to get, Marius, at 40 weeks or so. Our average is actually lower than this today, but you are gonna get here, right? You want to get here, but the thing is that this is not, the herd's not gonna go, of course, from acutely infected to stable. Those things are gonna happen, and they're gonna happen in this order. So we encourage people to monitor the recovery of the herd, both by productivity, things like aborts, you can see there, aborts, numbers of stillborns, mummies, piglet mortality, so on and so forth, and ensure that those things are recovering. If not, you shouldn't think, oh, this is PRRS does that, right? It's hopeless. Just give it another few weeks and things are gonna settle down. It may or may not settle down. So you wanna monitor as close as possible from the outbreak, first clinically, then with diagnostics, to ensure that the herd is recovering. Because maybe the abortions are still high because of PRRS or because of the other 10 causes of abortions, right? Maybe you have a situation of co-infections or some other stuff going on, so you gotta take care of that. And then once that recovered, same thing here. So we encourage people to monitor closely to ensure that the herd is transitioning towards stability, and if not, right, if you're stuck somewhere in between, you gotta do some additional diagnostics, call Marcelo, do your necropsies, understand what are the co-infections, understand if the virus changed, if it's a different one, and you can answer all of that with diagnostics. And this is a summary of where you wanna be. Again, you wanna get to the success, herd stable. You're gonna actually start here in the middle. We use the example of processing fluids as your screening tool for that PRRS activity in terms of shedding in the herd. If you don't castrate physically the pigs, then tongue fluids from the newborns is a good alternative. Serum is another good alternative. But anyways, if they're still positive, then you want to tongue fluids your stillborn piglets. And if they're positive there, you know that it's pretty clear, right? The infection is still active in the gestation, so you still have vertical transmission going on. If they are negative, then good news, you don't have vertical transmission going on very likely, so it's time to really declare war in terms of your biocontainment, your MacRebel, your 10 pH rules to make sure that the pigs that are being born negative keep negative until here, right? And then once negative, that's also good news, but it's not the end of the story. You really got to monitor to see if you're weaning negative pigs. It's not uncommon where you have consistently negative processing fluid, but you still have positive pigs at weaning, because a lot of things happen in those many farrowing rooms, right? People, piglet, a lot of movements, weaning several times a week in some situations. So a lot of risky events for the virus to jump in. So you gotta ensure with diagnostics. And at this stage where you have several weeks of negative processing fluids, your herd is gonna be completely subclinical, very likely. So don't trust your eyes. Don't look at the production data and the pigs and say, yeah, I'm stable. You may be, but keep monitoring, diagnostically testing to ensure that you're not fully subclinical, leaking virus that's gonna gain ground here as soon as they are weaned.
Exactly, and those 5 steps, they work, and this is just a short summary of a publication that is was just submitted of 11 farms in Spain who have implemented as a common approach in one area the 5 steps for PRRS control. They were able to reduce the number of PRRS outbreaks in the systems. They were able to increase the litter sizes, and for sure this was highly financial beneficial for the system. So I'm glad that we are living in an area not only where PRRS is getting more severe, but where we have also all the tools and all the knowledge in place to control this disease. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to hand back over to Oliver.